Dennis Parlady checks in to say, I've been a Dog fan for 73 years. With me living in Alabama for the last 42 years, need to know, he says, I want to beat Bama and win that national championship. Well, Dennis, I hope you living in enemy territory there certainly get your chance to do that, and we appreciate you checking in here today. Anything else? We're running a little late here. We'll get on with the rest of the show. Jesse Dellinger says, no matter what, James Cook will go down as one of my all-time favorite dogs, and I think that's a pretty good thing to think about there. I also think, as maybe foreshadowed by the Tennessee game last week, that Cook could have some big moments coming up here for UGA as you head towards that postseason. That's obviously a very valuable playmaker that you get a chance to enjoy. Now, see, some of our folks were criticizing me earlier, afraid they weren't going to get their full 15 minutes here in the first and 15, but we've gotten pretty close to that, I'd say. We've gotten pretty close to that. Bob Zamblin says, when we win the national championship, hopefully we don't lose Todd Monken or Dan Lanning. Yeah, it could be interesting on that front, obviously. I mean, I haven't heard any really substantial, credible rumors for either one of those guys yet. I mean, the thing to mention about Lanning in particular, this is obviously a great year for the Georgia defense, and oftentimes the coordinator gets an opportunity because of that. In the case of Lanning, though, it's important to note this. I think one day he's going to be a terrific head coach. For now, he's still a pretty young guy. And, he got a big promotion a couple of years ago to even be given that defensive coordinator role. And originally it was kind of sold as he's like a co-DC, and it seemed like those responsibilities were somewhat obscured. But now he's clearly moved into that. I mean, at least in terms of how it's positioned, he's clearly that defensive coordinator type guy. And, eventually I think he's going to be a great head coach, much the same way I think he's been a great defensive coordinator. It was a huge coup back in the offseason when George was able to hold on to him as defensive coordinator when he didn't leave and take big money that could have come his way to a place like Texas. But as far as him leaping to become a head coach, I mean, he is still a pretty young guy here. And this is, for the most part, a sport that's still obsessed with offense, even with Georgia doing as well as it is defensively. So that could impact, Lanning during this offseason. In the case of, Monken, I guess it remains to be seen. Todd's a guy who's been a head coach before. He's also been a play caller in the NFL. You want to go back to 2018 when he went to the Tampa Bay Bucks. So I'm sure he's going to have opportunities too. And I also know, just given the success that he's enjoyed, Georgia's going to do everything it can to keep him in place, because I think right now Georgia's got as good a pair of coordinators as you can have. All right, we'll do a couple more comments. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We'll get ready to start the regular show here in just a little bit. Anything else real quick before we move on? Tom says, I love how our season is ending with no SEC games. Is that going to be the norm? I don't think it's going to be the norm. I think what you see is, like, Georgia had its turn to do this in 2019. That's not an official round-robin rotational thing, but if you'll remember, Georgia had to play an SEC opponent on Cupcake Saturday in 2019. You remember that? Georgia played Texas A&M for the most part. The rest of the league played FCS opponents. Last year was weird because of the pandemic. This year, Georgia gets the FCS game, whereas programs like Alabama are playing SEC opponents. I think one of the things the league is trying to do, if you go back a few years ago, you had everybody, for the most part, playing cupcakes on that second to last regular season weekend. And I think the SEC realized that wasn't a very good look for the program. I'm sorry, for the league. Wasn't a very good look for the league. So they're altering schedules a little bit. By rule, everybody has to play the final week before the SEC championship game. That's an SEC rule. It just so happens that Georgia, along with South Carolina, Florida, and Kentucky, have in-state rivals who are out of conference, so you're already playing that Power 5 opponent there, and therefore the rest of the league constructs conference games to go along around that. And so everybody kind of plays the FBS Power 5 opponent to close out the season. It just so happens that Georgia plays an out-of-conference in-state foe there in that regard. But the one thing I think the SEC's actually tried to do is backload the schedules a little bit more. The SEC West plays a lot of games against itself late in the season because that's who those rivalry games are. In a lot of ways, the SEC East really hasn't done that because of Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, and Kentucky playing their ACC rivals at the end of the year. You typically have the cupcake game the week before that. But by moving Tennessee to November, I think some of that was trying to create that down-the-stretch excitement that exists or can exist in the SEC West in a year in which the division isn't fully salted away there. So I do think you see a little bit of an evolution occurring with the schedules. They're trying to at least water down what used to be Cupcake Weekend a little bit, but honestly, in the future, you've probably got even more change coming for the schedules than you're currently dealing with right now. So, great comments. We appreciate you being here for our first in 15 on DawgNation.com and on the DawgNation app. Also, for those of you joining us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, we're happy to have you with us too. We'll talk some UGA recruiting with Jeff Sintel. Couple of key names to get an update from Jeff on. Then we'll kind of go around the board here with some other recruiting stuff. After that, Jeff also had a great series of guests Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger as of late. It was Jalen Walker, the linebacker, commit last week, Big Bear Alexander this week, so he's had a nice run there on Before the Hedges. We'll probably get into some of that with him before it's all said and done. A little bit of a curiosity about the visitor list for Saturday. Not a huge game, but the last time to be Between the Hedges, so what does that mean from a recruiting standpoint? We'll talk about that. I'll give you a handful of things to watch over the course of the weekend that extend beyond the dogs on the field. But to begin with, and huge announcement. I told this to our audience that joined us for the First and 15 a moment ago. I'll tell all you video folks right now. I'm not going to do it right off the top of the program. I don't have time to. But before we're done today, I'm going to make a gigantic announcement about something we've never done before at DawgNation, but we're going to do it big here as we look ahead to the upcoming year. This is going to be incredible. Can't wait to tell you about it. It's going to really be as fun as anything we've ever done. Unprecedented in the history of DawgNation. That's the announcement coming. Also off the top of the program, there's something that Georgia fans, I think, should be watching very closely for. There's something maybe the team itself should be watching very closely for, looking very closely at here this weekend. Georgia's path to a playoff and a national championship eventually. We may learn something somewhat significant about that here this weekend. I'll tell you why to get things started. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, I'm not going to lie to you. With Georgia only playing Charleston Southern on Saturday, there are just only so many ways that you can chop up this game. People are interested in the young players get a chance to play. People are obviously interested in saying goodbye to an impressive crop of UGA seniors. We'll have more on that in a moment. But when it comes to the game itself against Charleston Southern, there is just only so much juice a game like that's going to have, and that's nobody's fault. That's just a fact. However, I do think this upcoming college football weekend is very interesting for Georgia for a number of reasons, and some of that actually extends beyond just what is going to happen with the dogs on the field. There's another game that's going to take place on Saturday that I do think could have a lot of intrigue for UGA and could potentially foreshadow what Georgia's path through the playoff eventually looks like. Let me start it this way. We were lucky on Wednesday to have Mr. College Football Tony Barnhart on the show. Tony's a guy that I just love. I love his insight on the SEC. He knows the league and has known the league for a long time as well as anybody. And in talking about Georgia and in the Georgia defense in particular, Tony said something that I thought was pretty interesting in terms of what this Georgia defense is doing right now. Now, to me, Tony's words here come in the context of what makes maybe this Georgia defense better than other good Georgia defenses. Because historically, in the Smart era, 2017, 2018, 2019, Georgia had top shelf, very, very good defenses. Last year probably took a little bit of a step back in that regard, but honestly, that was a weird year. 2020 was a year in which a lot of teams took a step back defensively. So you kind of throw that out and say, hey, there's been a consistent pattern of Georgia being good defensively, but it's also been a consistent pattern of coming up short when it comes to winning a national championship. So is this year going to be different in all of that? Well, when you listen to Tony Barnhart, who's Mr. College Football, who knows the situation really well, on our show this week, the way in which he described the Georgia defense certainly gives you an idea that, hey, you know what, maybe this year really will be different there in that regard. This is Tony from Wednesday on our show talking UGA defense. Take a listen to this.
This Georgia defense dictates the game. Okay, this Georgia defense controls what the other team can do. You could see it in the Tennessee game. Yeah, Tennessee came out first possession, moved the ball down the field, but after that, Georgia pretty much dictated all day long. Coaches in this league, what would get them is the fact that when Georgia substitutes, particularly on that front and on front, the people that come in are just as good. And so that depth, particularly when you get to November, as we are now, that depth is a wonderful thing to have.
Look, what Barnhart says at the end there is unquestionably, undeniably true. When you've got a guy like Channing Tindall technically playing as a backup, and he does what he did at Tennessee a week ago, there's no doubt that the Georgia depth is unmatched. It's unrivaled. I'm sure it does leave opposing coaching staff salivating. Tony's talked to those staffs, and that's what they've told him, and we can fairly easily assume that you'd love to have. In most SEC programs, even Georgia backups would be high-level starters for many of the teams around this league. That's just kind of obviously true. But it's actually what Tony says at the beginning of that clip that really gets my attention. I'm going to have this on my mind in a big way this weekend, going beyond just Georgia's game against Charleston Southern. Tony says that right now the Georgia defense dictates the game. That this is a team that can set the pace on that defensive side of the football. That the Georgia defense decides how a game is going to be played. It's dictated by what Georgia does on that side of the ball. Now, let's be very candid here for a moment. This is the kind of thing that Georgia fans obviously hope is true. But there is also, I think, a suspicion that come playoff time, that won't be true. And if you just want to be real here for a moment, when you think about like the little bit of lingering anxiety that still exists among some Georgia fans, when you think about the little bit of just, I got to wait and see on this team before I feel really good about them winning a national championship, it's not just the 40 years, blah, blah, blah. It's actually that specific point right there. Because, as I said before, Georgia had a very good defense in 2017. Very good defense in 2017. But when it played Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl, the Georgia defense didn't dictate that game. The Oklahoma offense probably did. Now, the defense asserted itself much more in the second half, and you remember that. That's what led to the Georgia win. But ultimately, it was the Oklahoma offense that kind of dictated the way that game was played. Also, very good Georgia defense in 2018. But in an SEC championship against Alabama, especially in the second half, it was an Alabama offense that dictated the way that game was played. Georgia had to do more offensively than it had to do against most opponents. The Alabama offense was there to answer the challenge each and every time. Georgia ultimately allowed 35 points to the Crimson Tide there that day. Great Georgia defense, but it didn't control the game. It didn't dictate the way the game was played. In the 2018 SEC title game, the Alabama offense probably did that. If that was true in those two previous games, that was definitely true 2019 SEC championship when it allowed 37 points to LSU, probably the most explosive, probably the best offense I've ever seen. Not a surprise they control a game that they're in, but clearly for a Georgia defense that statistically speaking had also been dominant on their side of the ball, when it came to a game against LSU, that defense was not able to control the pace. It was not able to dictate the game. It was not able to do that against LSU there in 2019. So when you hear Tony Barnhart say here in 2021, this Georgia defense is so good, it's so deep, it's so dominant that it can now control games. It now dictates the pace. It now determines the way in which a game feels. It creates the shape of a game by just how dominant it is on that side of the ball. That's what Georgia fans hope to be true, but you're left to wonder, is that really true? Now, I believe it's more true for Georgia in 2021 than it has been in the past, and I'll give you two quick reasons. Reason number one is, while Georgia's been good defensively under Kirby Smart, just the look of those defenses isn't quite what it is right now. Georgia already through 10 games has more sacks than it's had under Kirby Smart for the most part, and you still got the potential 5 more games to come. This is clearly a more impactful defense in the backfield than previous Georgia defenses have been, so you've got that going for you. There's also just a larger collection of high front-end level NFL draft talent on this defense than even some of the very prodigiously talented teams in the recent past. So that's there. The other thing that John Stinchcomb mentioned, and I do a weekly show with John now called Chase for the Championship, where we talk about how Georgia stacks up to the rest of the contenders for the college football playoff. We look at the CFP Top 25 on that show each and every week. It comes up Thursdays on the DawgNation video channels. But on that show yesterday, John said the other reason why he thought that Georgia was in position to kind of dictate games defensively more so this year was because when you look around, you don't see a Joe Burrow. You don't see a Tua Tagovailoa. You don't see these quarterbacks from the recent past that really ushered in this offensive explosion. You don't see that level of quarterback play right now from the top teams around the country. And John says that favors Georgia and its defense as you go through the college football playoff. There is still, though, a level of skepticism, I believe, among some Georgia fans about how true that's going to end up being. So this gives us a chance to watch a game on Saturday. And I got to tell you, beyond what's going to happen with UGA, and I'm always going to be the most interested in Georgia in any given week, but beyond what happens with UGA, I am very interested in Ohio State, Michigan State playing on Saturday for a number of reasons, almost all of those UGA related. First of all, like a lot of former Georgia assistants, you root for Sam Pittman at Arkansas when you can. And I think a lot of Georgia fans also will be rooting for Mel Tucker over there at Michigan State. He's about to get a big raise, big salary bump. Certainly seems like that's in the workings, and good for him on that. They've been doing the Tuck coming thing, borrowing from the Wire with the Omar stuff. They've been doing that from Mel Tucker. You've seen T-shirts, things like that. They're really building into that. I think that's really fun, and that's really good to do there as well. But beyond just kind of having a little bit of an emotional attachment to Tucker and hoping his team does well against Ohio State on Saturday, I do believe if you're a Georgia fan and you're wondering, can defense dominate in the college football playoff? Can defense, as Tony Barnhart said on Wednesday, can it dictate the game in an SEC championship, in a college football playoff semifinal, in a college football playoff national championship game? In some respects, what happens for Michigan State and Ohio State, I think, is a little bit of a precursor to that. Now, to be clear about something, Michigan State's talent on either side of the ball is nowhere close to what Georgia has. I'm not saying that if Michigan State can't do it, that means Georgia can't do it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm actually saying is, if Michigan State can have some success knowing what it wants to do, if it can have some success against a team like Ohio State that probably stands as the number one threat to UGA outside of Alabama, if Michigan State can have some success there against Georgia, I should say against Ohio State on Saturday, then to me that opens up the door for even more success for a team like Georgia that's just a more beefed up version of what Mel Tucker wants to do, potentially in the college football playoff. Let me give you a point that backs this up. So I'll go to mlive.com. Story about the game. MLive's a website that covers this stuff up there in the state of Michigan. And the thought of Ohio State having this explosive offense and the fact that Michigan State may have to be a little bit more out of its comfort zone. You know, they have Kenneth Walker at running back. They like to keep the ball on the ground. They would prefer a lower scoring game. Ohio State obviously wants to play the game as quickly and with as many points as possible. That's just what they're more comfortable doing. Buckeyes are not very good defensively. They're great offensively. So the question to Tucker this week was the potential of having to beat Ohio State in a shootout. Now, listen to this for a moment. And obviously, this just comes dripping with the Kirby Smart influence here on Mel Tucker, you would think. But it's another reason why, if you're a Georgia fan and you're curious how you stack up against a potential playoff contender, what Tucker and Michigan State do there really matters. So this is from mlive.com. I don't have this quote to show you on the screen. I'm just going to read it to you. He says, this is Mel Tucker. I'm not in the shootout business. If it ends up being that against Ohio State, then that's what it is, but that's not the goal. So that's Mel Tucker right there saying that I have a goal on Saturday against Ohio State that I want to dictate the game. That's the phrase that Tony Barnhart used about Georgia. I want to control the pace. I don't want to allow Ohio State to turn this into a shootout type game. If you watch this game on Saturday and it becomes a shootout, then from a coaching standpoint, I've at least failed in my prime objective, which is to control the pace with which game is played, a lot of Kenneth Walker running the football, and as much defense as possible to keep this being a lower scoring game. I mean, doesn't that add to the intrigue there? Now, to be clear, I don't expect Michigan State to win this game on Saturday. I don't think they're talented enough to do that. They are about a 3-touchdown underdog. But what if they're good enough to keep it close? And what if Mel Tucker really is correct that, hey, I may not be good enough to beat them, but my running game and my defense are good enough to dictate this game to make Ohio State uncomfortable doing things it does not want to do? Doesn't that then become a pretty interesting blueprint for Georgia fans who are saying, can this Georgia defense really be the deciding factor for a national championship? Well, what you see on Michigan State could give you a little bit of a hint about that one way or another. If Ohio State marches up and down the field, scores 50, 60 points, then maybe at that point in time, some of that anxiety does creep back in. But if the opposite happens, and if Michigan State can do something to at least keep the game a little bit closer, then that's kind of where you go on that. One more quick thing on this point, and then we'll shift gears and talk about something else. I also think Ohio State on Saturday looms pretty interesting in that, as I said before, I am firmly of the belief that the number one challenger for Georgia right now in terms of winning a national championship, I believe that's to be Alabama. But beyond Alabama, if you look outside that, I think Ohio State's probably the next toughest team there. So how much should Georgia fans even feel concerned about the Buckeyes? How much should Georgia fans even feel any kind of tension about the Buckeyes whatsoever? Well, some of you know who the Bear is, Chris Felica from ESPN College Game Day. He also does an ESPN podcast with Stanford Steve. I try to listen to as many podcasts as I can. I just want to know what national-type people are saying about college football. And what Felica said this week on the ESPN podcast that he does is that Georgia should want to avoid Ohio State until a national championship game, if it possibly can, saying that Georgia's going to have motivation when the SEC title game, even beyond just the typical motivation of the pride of beating Alabama and winning the SEC title game and all that. He says it's simply a matter of staying away from Ohio State until you have to play them in the national title game. I don't know if Georgia fans believe this or not or buy into this or not, but I do think it's worth hearing Chris Felica on this as maybe another reason why taking a peek at Ohio State could be interesting for Georgia fans on Saturday. This is the Bear, Chris Felica, from an ESPN podcast this week.
One thing that people are going to say, I think in the next while, it doesn't matter for Georgia if they win or lose. They're in the title game. Oh, it matters. it definitely matters, because if they win, you're the number one seed. And we were having the debate before about who's going to be 4. Is it Cincinnati? Is it like, if you lose, Alabama's going to be number 1, and you're going to be stuck in a 2-3 game with Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Like, you talk about a massive, but play Cincinnati or Ohio State. What would you rather do? So like that SEC title game, and I'm sure Kirby and his staff are going to be ingrained. Like, beat Alabama, beat Alabama, beat Alabama, beat Alabama. Yep. It matters. So because if they lose, you're going to be stuck in a semifinal that is very worthy of being a title game.
So I think that's interesting from the Bear, Chris Felica, but I'm not quite so sure I buy into all of that. The notion that Georgia might be stuck in a semifinal game against Ohio State. I think Ohio State's the next biggest challenger for UGA outside of Alabama, but I don't think the challenge is quite so formidable that I would feel stuck if Georgia was playing the Buckeyes in a national semifinal as opposed to a national title game. Now, in comparison to an Oregon or a Cincinnati, or one of those teams that Georgia could play, those other games would obviously be much easier than Ohio State. So from that point, I agree. But I'm not quite so sure that I'm fully sold on the Buckeyes yet, to the degree that it sounds like Chris Felica is right there, which for me is another reason to watch this game on Saturday. Can Ohio State make it look easy against Michigan State, or can Michigan State, with a style of play that's at least somewhat similar to what Georgia might want to do, can they do just well enough to keep it close? If they can, then it becomes easy to imagine that Georgia, with much better talent on both sides of the ball, could do a whole lot more than that. And maybe one of those formidable foes that's supposed to be a stumbling block on Georgia's way towards a national championship, maybe knocking that bunch down might actually feel a little easier than some folks might assume. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented by Kroger, and we're glad to have you with us today, no matter how you get to us. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We start at 9:45 in the morning on our First and 15, DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app. We're available podcasts all across the various podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, everything else. World-famous DawgNation.com. We also post the show each and every day. And, of course, on the radio, Athens Sports Radio, 960 The Rep, every day at noon. Those of you check in with us on the radio there in the Classic City, we certainly appreciate that there as well. Also, a big thanks to our friends at Kroger for making all of this possible. Kroger, boy, they're getting you ready for Thanksgiving. And I was talking to my mom last night, and she's getting stocked up. She's getting everything that she needs there. It's time to really get ready for it. I mean, next week's the big week, and I'm excited about it. I love Thanksgiving, and I loved when you go into Kroger this time of year and you see everybody just kind of in there doing the festive thing. It almost kind of reminds me of like one of those old movies or something, where just everybody's just getting all the good stuff they need for a great Thanksgiving meal. And obviously, Kroger's going to help you make those dollars go a little farther here this year when it comes to all of that. And they're going to be there for you on Thanksgiving Day there as well, because invariably, here's what happens. You got everything you need but one thing. It's like you got everything but just that one last little ingredient. So Thanksgiving Day, Kroger's at, and Michael Carvel, our producer, shaking his head. He's a big chef. He knows all about that. Well, on Thanksgiving Day, Kroger's actually open to 4 p.m. So if you have that little thing that you don't have, how about the folks at Kroger there giving some time from their families away to be there for our family on Thanksgiving Day, that last-minute thing? Go check that out at Kroger. They're open to 4 p.m. there on Thanksgiving Day. And go ahead and get stocked up on everything you need. It's time to do that. Kroger.com or in-store at your local Kroger for more details there. All right, it's Recruiting Talk with Jeff Sintel here coming up in just a moment. Before we're done today, gigantic announcement that I have been chomping at the bit to be able to give you. Today, I got a chance to give it to you. We're going to talk a lot about this in the time to come. This is going to be incredible. We'll do that here in just a little bit. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse, and it's delivered today by Marco's Pizza. And I just spent a good bit of time off the top of the program talking about why that my largest curiosity for Saturday will be focused on games other than Georgia. And I got a few more of those kind of points I'm going to make before the show is done. But here's what I'll say about UGA on Saturday. And, I mentioned my mom a moment ago. She's actually coming with my family my wife and kids to the game tomorrow. And that's what a lot of this ends up being when you're facing Charleston Southern. It's a lot of opportunity. My mom hasn't been in a game in years, and she's looking forward to being there. A lot of folks find a game like this where it's a great time to come for the first time or the first time in a long time. My brother's bringing his youngest daughter, who obviously too young to come to a lot of games, but this feels like a pretty good game for that. And when you look around the stadium, on a Saturday like tomorrow, that's what you see a lot of. It's a lot of people who, hey, the regular grind of the fall makes it almost impossible to be there a lot, but a little easier to get tickets for a game like this, a little easier for everybody to be there, and just kind of a nice day for people who don't normally get a chance to come. But for those of you who will be there, or you're tuned in on the streaming internet to SEC Network Plus, ESPN Plus to watch it, I mean, here's one of the things that I think you got to have the right mindset for going into a day like tomorrow. I know this is going to seem a little bit trite, but I mean this as real as I possibly can, is that if you think about July, when we're just craving college football, and it seems like it's never going to get here. When we do DawgNation Daily each and every day all throughout the year, and there are obviously some days coming in and doing this show, there's always plenty to talk about, and I always love talking Georgia football no matter what day it is, but there are some days that you can sit here in this chair, and the season just feels kind of a long way away. Well, the season is here right now, and there's a weird thing about college football. To me, it always goes by so fast in comparison to Major League Baseball, 162 games long. Even the NFL is like 17 regular season games. That's a lot longer of a season. But the college season is just so much quicker by comparison. The shortest regular season of any of the sports that most of us follow, and it finally gets here. You blink your eyes, it's halfway over. You blink your eyes again, it's just done. I mean, tomorrow is the last time for all of us between the hedges here this year. And for some of the players who will play in that game, it's the last time they'll ever do that. And I'm kind of an emotional sap when it comes to stuff like this. I just am sentimental by nature. I don't really know why I am so sentimental. I think as I get older, my kids now make me more sentimental. So stuff like Senior Day and things like that just always kind of gets to me. I'm just kind of a dork about stuff like that. I just have to confess. But I think for all of us, even if you're not quite as, bound to sentiment as I am, I do think there's something about just kind of appreciating the fact that, boy, we only get a small handful of these. It's a great day to be in Sanford Stadium, Dooley Field tomorrow, between the hedges, a great chance to watch a crop of Georgia seniors, some of which might come back next year because of the weird extra year of eligibility, some of which we know are moving on. For instance, this week, Kirby Smart talked a little bit about the defensive tackles, Devontae Wyatt and Jordan Davis. Obviously, y'all know how we feel about Jordan Davis. We've talked about him so much. Wyatt, those also had a sensational season. And in terms of getting your mind right to appreciate these seniors as they play for the last time tomorrow, Smart talking about the fact that both Wyatt and Davis made their decision to come back to UGA this year, to be seniors on this team, and the value that brought to Georgia when they did do that. So if you're getting ready to appreciate Senior Day, I think the words of Kirby Smart about Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis, two of those special seniors for Georgia, I think this will get you kind of where you want to go. This is Kirby Smart from this week.
They both respect each other and love each other so much. They've grown to be really good friends and very different backgrounds. But they're great competitors. They've been great for Georgia. Their decision to come back was probably the most impactful of everybody's, because they probably had the highest grades of those juniors that came back, because it's so hard to find defensive linemen. And those guys coming back kind of put everything in motion.
Listen, there's a video that Georgia put out this week of kind of a goodbye to the seniors. It's actually narrated by Jordan Davis. He did such a good job with that. It was just really cool how well he just read it professionally almost, inflecting the voice and getting the drama parts right and really hit the high notes with that. It was just really good, and it's worth your time to check that out. And I know that Georgia fans will show great appreciation to him. We've obviously loved doing the hashtag JD to NYC. We think that Jordan Davis deserves to be. We think he will be in New York City as a Heisman finalist. We're pushing him across that line even as we speak, trying to keep that going with Georgia fans. But he's not the only senior worth celebrating, the only senior worth appreciating. Guys like Devontae Wyatt and some of those others, obviously, very, very instrumental in the success that Georgia's enjoying right now. So get there early, give a big ovation to them. Some of these guys you may give an ovation to again next year as well, and there's nothing wrong with that. Never a bad reason to give a standing ovation to a Georgia football player who sticks around and devotes himself to improving himself and in making Georgia better than he found it. So good day tomorrow. Do your morning style tailgate, maybe get the breakfast beverages going there, whatever that is for you. But whatever, enjoy it, settle in. Final day between the hedges tomorrow. I know Dog fans and Dog Nation all the way around will truly make it a very big day. That is Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And obviously for a lot of you, you can't be in Athens for whatever reason, but you're going to be at home and you'll be tuning in there. And, of course, as you're getting your own kind of game day watching party together, Marco's Pizza goes great for you with all of that. I love it because it tastes good. It's authentic, real pizza, golden brown crust baked perfectly every time. The old world toppings that go on top of that, the 3 cheeses blended, melted together. I mean, you watch it on the video, I get so hungry every time that I mention it because that's how good it tastes. And the other thing that tastes good to me is the price as well. Because right now everything just seems like it's more expensive. But at Marco's Pizza, that's not the case. Right now you can still get a large one-topping pizza for just $9.99. Isn't that great? A large one-topping pizza for $9.99. You can feed a family like that, feed yourself like that. Good pizza at a great price. That's what Marco's Pizza is. You can check it out online, marcos.com, and the Marco's app. Marco's Pizza. Pizza lovers get it. And we're glad to have you here today on our program. So we've got a lot going on. I told you before, I got a big announcement I'm going to make later on. I'm excited about that. I have got a couple of other of the games this weekend that I think are worth your attention, worth watching for, taking a look at. We'll kind of cover some of that before we're done here. Obviously getting ready for a big game, high school football tonight with Cartersville hosting Warner Robins. There's going to be, 6,000-7,000 people up there in Cartersville. This is probably the game in the state of Georgia tonight. I think it is. Obviously, huge second-round matchup. We're looking forward to doing that. Jeff Sintel will be with us. We'll be both on the road here for that later on today. And by the way, speaking of on the road, let's also get some recruiting update from Jeff there as well as we go on the road, assisted by AAA. Some news of note, maybe with a UGA commit, a one-time UGA target who's made a different decision, and everything else in between. Let's cover it all right now. On the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sintel. Good to have all of you with us here today on the program as well.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will say hello to Jeff Sintel here on the road, assisted by AAA. Jeff's had a great series of guests on his show Before the Hedges each and every week, including Big Barry Alexander from this past Wednesday. Hope folks will check that out on the DawgNation video channels because that was another really good one. It was Jalen Walker, the UGA linebacker commit, the week before that. And Jeff, if you don't mind, the ranks of UGA commits is kind of where I want to start right now because there's been a good bit of buzz over the course of the last few days about Tyree West, and that's a defensive line commit, and there's been a little bit of social media activity from him. He's kind of retweeting some Florida State-themed tweets as of late. There's some online chatter that he could be looking to take a visit there to Florida State, and obviously this opens up a lot of questions for Georgia fans related to what may be going on with West, but obviously the fact that Georgia's kind of down the road pretty well with some very good players that would kind of fit a similar need there for UGA. So just kind of open-ended here, how can you fill us in on these details related to Tyree West right now, what that means for the rest of Georgia's class if West is really shopping around at the moment?
Yeah, good morning, everybody, Brandon. And I think, it's unfortunate that that's kind of just where things are at. I think you use the term shopping around, and I don't know if it's Black Friday shopping, but, Tyree West has been a guy, first of all, South Georgia kid, big motor, wants to make a difference in his life, wants to change his future and his kind of trajectory in life from a lot of really good players around Tift County. He's told me that he's grown up around. I thought it was very telling when he visited Florida State this week for a practice. He told reporters afterward that he was still committed to Georgia, but it certainly didn't sound like it. He said he was going to take visits to Tennessee and Auburn. He was going to take another visit to Florida State. Of course, Florida State is the local favorite, very closer to him in Tifton. And the other thing, Brandon, is the landscape of recruiting, not just in the minds of these young men, kind of changes a lot. And for Tyree West, I want to just kind of package this up for folks so they can understand. He's a number 90 overall recruit. You have to go back to the 2018 cycle. That's Robert Cooper out of South Gwinnett High School in 2018. That's the last time Florida State signed a top 150 overall recruit for the defensive line. Georgia, on the other hand, they signed 2 last year. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins and Jonathan Jefferson. And then this year, you've got Big Bear Alexander, you've got Michael Williams, and now you've also got Georgia with, I think we can safely term as surging interest from both Christian Miller and Hero Canoe. And all of a sudden, the Shamar Stewart's in the mix there as well. Georgia's got 2 big defensive tackles, kind of 0-techs, 3-techs, coming in for Charleston Southern this weekend on an official visit. That's Shone Washington out of New Orleans And there's also Deion Walker, another Jordan Davis-sized body, a 4-star out of Detroit, Michigan, who's coming in this weekend on an official visit as well. So Georgia is definitely being very active. Tyree West, as he stands right now, he's still committed. He is right now he's the 8th highest rated guy in Georgia's class. If he joined Florida State's class, he would be the 3rd highest rated guy in their class. He would be one of their anchor commitments. So I think what you have here is, I've tried to lay it out and kind of be sort of vanilla conservative about it, is you have Georgia actively recruiting multiple defensive tackles to add to their already stellar class. And then you have Tyree West taking visits, really feeling something there with Florida State. He also visited Texas A&M over the summer. He visited Florida State over the summer as well. So that's kind of one of those that has been tenuous at times in my own kind of conceptuality of how much likely Tyree West was going to be an eventual signee in this class.
So this is one of those things, Jeff, where I feel like I actually have a decent level of consistency. Now, people know I'm not partisan. I should say I am partisan. I want Georgia to have the best class it can get. But when it comes to a lot of the players that we talk about here, I say this all the time, that I never criticize anybody for taking visits. I never criticize anybody for really going through their paces to make the best decision. For instance, it's not hard to find people online who sometimes rip a recruit for, these guys don't know what committed means. These guys, they say one thing, but then they're out shopping around somewhere else. I actually have never minded that. And we have a lot of recruits that obviously watch and listen to our show. I'm going to tell you this. I'd obviously love for every player in the country to come to Georgia. But beyond that, as an adult, a little older than these guys, I'm going to say that you should always look around to make sure you're making the best decision for you, that you're going to have the clearest path to playing time, that you're going to have the best opportunity to flourish. And frankly, the teams, whether it be Georgia or any other team, they should also make sure that they're using their scholarship spots the best that they possibly can to make sure they've got the best possible players coming in. So it's one of the reasons why I always say that I have a very high tolerance for so-called recruiting drama. Now, this particular issue is not very dramatic. This is just, kind of typical process here. But I'm not one of these guys that has, an allergy to players who look around, players who take late visits, players who want to make sure they really are going to have a clear path to playing time where they're going, and, programs that sometimes feel like they have to do kind of the same thing. I have a fairly high tolerance for all of that. Some people don't, but it's never really bothered me.
Yeah, the other thing to think about here is, every time I've been around Tyree West, really hardworking young man, good personality. He's always had a silver charm around his neck. And when you saw him in October when he visited for the Arkansas game, he had a Georgia Power G charm around his neck. And that was one of those things where I was thinking, that was a moment where I'm like, well, Georgia's pull for him is still really strong. He's obviously wearing that charm around his neck. He's worn like Rugrats characters and other different paraphernalia, different items, different tokens, pieces around his neck at times. And, with Tyree, the thing that for me is I can go back to, Brandon, February, January, last November. There was a light in his eyes about playing for Georgia. And then there was a light in his eyes as well about getting the chance to maybe one day play on the college level with both Michael Williams and Christian Miller. Those guys wanted to try and make it happen. And frankly, all those guys were really talented enough to make it happen as well. You had Michael Williams initially commit to USC, and then there was for a minute there where there was the thinking, the really strong, valid thinking that, well, maybe Christian Miller and Tyree West are going to go with him to Southern California as well. And much like things change with USC and its season, as the seasons turn, so do maybe some of those feelings right there for a lot of those young men. And now Michael Williams is committed to Georgia. Christian Miller is, I would say, feeling a certain type of way about both Georgia and Ohio State. The Bulldogs do have a very strong shot there. And you have Tyree West. When we hear this all the time, Brandon, they've got to make the best decisions for his future. And I don't know, from just talking to people that know Tyree West and around that situation, I think the biggest thing is he could go kind of be the man at Florida State. It could be local. It could be a lot closer. Or he could try to fight tooth and nail to be a part of something that is the number one team in the country and the number one recruiting class in the country right now at the University of Georgia. So there's a lot of mixed emotions around that situation right now. I do think it's pretty telling that when he felt the love from Florida State. He got to see it practice. I think Tyree West told reporters after that Florida State visit that Florida State's coaches said they're going to take care of him, and he's wanted and needed, and it's relationship building time. He did maintain that he was still committed to Georgia, and he was just going to look around and look at everything.
All right, thanks for the update on that. Another piece of, I guess, interesting news, not great news, but also not unexpected either. Greene Jr., the wide receiver that we've talked about many times before, I really like him as a player. It's one of the reasons why I think I've probably brought him up with you so much, but he did pick North Carolina as his college choice. This is what I think the industry kind of thought he was going to do, but ultimately that's another big wide receiver off the board. So I guess give me an autopsy on Greene here, but also kind of where things stand with Georgia still needing those dynamic playmakers. That's obviously an ever-present need, but for Georgia in this 2022 class, I think it's specifically a need. So your thoughts on that all the way around?
Yeah, so Greene, I really thought he was a special player. The more I study players these days, Brandon, one of the first things I do, especially everybody that's considering Georgia strongly or has been targeted by Georgia, is they're all going to have the skill set. They're all going to have the ability to play and be an impact guy potentially on Saturdays. The thing I really look for that's become a separator in my experience is like a mindset. It's a mindset that the young man would be a thriving part of a college community even without ball. That's the things I always got from Greene Jr. Of course, he's 6'3", he's 185, and he can instill or wake up some echoes of some A.J. Green comparisons for Georgia. I'll be frank. If I could have any three receivers, if I'm recruiting for Big State U, and I can have any three receivers in the country in this class, or maybe even of the last 3 or 4 years, I'd probably pick Greene Jr. And
wow.
Georgia fans are going to go, well, that's a loss. But you also got to remember this is what it does for North Carolina, and they recruited him well. It was a local option for him. Virginia, he's from Richmond, Virginia. North Carolina's a little bit closer than Athens. It's a little bit closer than South Carolina. But really, North Carolina and Mack Brown, they just recruited well. They took him away from Clemson, even when Clemson had the last at bat. So those that are in the camp of they want the ACC to get stronger, and they want more players like Travis Shaw and Zach Rice, a pair of 5-stars, and now Greene, who I think is a 5-star as well. Even though if he's only rated the number 9 receiver in the country. North Carolina's getting a lot stronger, but as one door closes, Brandon, the soap opera of recruiting spins around, and I tell you, something's happening there. Big Bear Alexander even talked about it this week on Before the Hedges. You have a combination of factors here, Brandon. You have Florida wilting. That was a place where Evan Stewart was likely to go or thinking hard about going. You have Texas wilting as well. That was another place that Evan Stewart had on his mind. That's the nation's number 3 overall prospect. Number 1 wide receiver now. He's jumped Luther Burden III in recent re-ranks. And there's a strong connection there with Julian Humphrey, the recent Georgia commitment, who's really working the recruiting trail like he's Dom and Fast and Furious hitting the NOS button. And you have Big Bear talking to him, also a Texas native. You have Julian Humphrey talking to him. You have Julian Humphrey making these not so cryptic tweets on social media is like, you're going to love who I'm bringing. You're going to love who I'm bringing. You didn't expect this guy. And the guy he's talking about there, of many, Brandon, would be Evan Stewart. And all of a sudden, you wonder, okay, Greene didn't happen. Luther Burden didn't happen. Over the summer, Georgia was in very thick of the woods with Evan Stewart. And maybe this is a catalyst agent again. This is a change agent again for Georgia to get back in the Evan Stewart stuff. Here's what I got to counsel guys on. I want to make sure folks don't get ahead of their water skis here on the lake here. What I'm going to say is that I think that young man needs to visit. I put him on the other targets to watch, but for me, things might really get serious and jump on that Hedges top targets list that we roll out every week on Before the Hedges when he takes a visit to Georgia. He needs to take an official visit to Georgia, had to be around that program. Can't do it on a game day unless he miraculously shows up today, but shows up on Saturday, pardon me for that. But I think the news of Greene Jr. choosing North Carolina over Clemson with Georgia coming in third there, I think what you have there now is Evan Stewart, the Evan Stewart charge, and the hopes for Evan Stewart are back. And that's one that I know fans will be watching now, of course.
So I have to be honest with you, I have not even considered Evan Stewart in a long time. So that's obviously very interesting for me. And I guess remind us here for a moment. We talking about a December timeline for Stewart here, because if he could take an official visit, I mean, selfishly, I kind of like those December official visits anyway, because I've always jokingly said that's like, if you know that's a great time to really be at Georgia, because you really can roll out the red carpet. Yes, you're not seeing the game day environment, but I think you're getting probably better attention on one of those December officials than you would get for one of those game days. Now, for Georgia, it's going to be a busy December, but they're going to find time to do what needs to be done there for recruiting. So is that what we're looking for here, a potential game, I should say December official for an early signing day decision? Is that kind of what the timeline would be for Stewart there?
Yeah, Stewart's going to leave himself a lot of options. I know he's a brilliant track athlete, and he's probably clinging to the hope there that he wants to at least entertain the chance to come back for his final track season. Because Brandon, this kid's a 24 feet long jumper, 10.5, 10.6, 10.7 type guy in the 100. Electric. I don't know if you ever saw those viral videos of him and Julian Humphrey really going at war against each other at the Friday Night Lights camp in Gainesville down in the summer, when it seemed like both of those guys were vectoring towards Gainesville. But Kirby's going to pull a Kirby special, and it's going to be what he always done. You know this game plan, Brandon. It's they save all of the most influential commitments, and they park them on the last weekend before National Signing Day, early signing day. They get them all together, and then they sprinkle in about maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of the most plumb remaining undecided targets out there as well. And they get those guys all together, and that usually means great things for Georgia. I think I did this last year because we had the absence of those official visits last year. But Kirby's batting average with those guys, Kirby and the Georgia staff's batting average with those guys is probably, I think I calculated it around 72% in terms of bringing those guys in, those big 2 or 3 guys that are major targets that they bring in and they're undecided, and they get that last at-bat official before early signing day. That usually goes very well for Georgia.
Yeah, that is really incredible. Last thing for me on this, if I had to assume based on the recent chatter I'd been seeing, that it looked to me like Stewart might be trending towards Texas A&M. Do you think A&M right now would be Georgia's, I guess, number one competitor for Stewart if it came down to that?
Yeah, I think it's probably wait and see what's happening at Florida, even though all of his friends that he was going to go play with at Florida are now kind of trending elsewhere as well. Julian Humphrey has already made that decision. Shamar James certainly looks like that he's another name to consider there as well. So you have Texas A&M. Those would be the most likely schools that Georgia would be fighting with. And I think we should counsel everybody to look at it this way. This is Georgia getting back into the thing with Evan Stewart. I don't think any real sort of attachment might happen until the young man takes a visit and gets on campus, especially around a guy like Julian Humphrey and others like that.
Yeah, that's great stuff, Jeff. Thanks for sharing that. We're on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentell here today, and obviously it's fun to talk UGA recruiting, but there are other subjects that are at times more important in terms of how you take care of your family, even in the event of your untimely passing, which is obviously a horrible thing to bring up. But let's face it, it's also a reality there as well, that if your family, your spouse, your children, if they depend on your income, then your job is to make sure that they'd be still well taken care of if your income went away. If you went away, that's where life insurance comes in. And it's one of those things that's just kind of your role in life to make sure you're well taken care of on the life insurance front. And that's why I want you to think about AAA. They're more than just legendary roadside assistance. They're also able to simplify the life insurance process for you there as well. They got friendly folks who can help explain all that to you. You know, they've just very, very smart people that can help walk you through all of that. Their insurance agents can explain all this to you about how you can make the best decision, how you can get the coverage for your family that you need, and how the entire process can actually be a lot easier, more convenient than you might realize. They can simplify it for you, so make sure you check them out. You can give them a call, 866-695-0222. That's 866-695-0222. Or check them out online, aaa.com/live, AAA.com/live, or you can just stop in and see a AAA office today and get a lot more on that. All right, Jeff, a couple of quick things. We'll do this kind of rapid fire style if you want before we let you go. When we spoke last, we were still a few minutes away from Julian Humphrey making it official, choosing UGA. That's what happened last week, so have not had a chance to ask you about this yet. We know what kind of social media presence he is right now. He's become a very active recruiter for the Bulldogs. You even referenced that a moment ago. But as a player, what's Georgia getting in Julian Humphrey?
He's a bigger corner, Brandon. He's about 6'1". He's about 185. If you look at the film, you see blazing speed. One of the things I was fascinated when I talked to one of his coaches at Clear Lakes High School out in the Houston area in Texas. He's one of those guys that loves the competition of it all. For example, he's the guy that his ears really get perked up on free plays. You know what I'm talking about, Brandon, when somebody jumps off sides and the defense is guilty and the offense can just chuck that thing because they know they got a free play with nothing involved. They tracked about 5 or 6 plays on free plays this year where, I mean, Julian just takes things to the extreme. He wants to get a pick on that free play, or he wants to break the ball up on that free play, even though it doesn't go in the stat sheet, but he knows he's like taking something. He's like, you know, that whole mentality, nobody gets anything free on our defense, that every high school defensive coordinator rallies his troops with. Well, I mean, Julian goes crazy off that, man, getting the picks. I mean, they told me there are multiple picks he's gotten this year, countless PBUs on free plays, and I think that goes into the mindset of the player a lot. He's the one of those kids that's so fast that he loves seeing a kid 20 yards ahead of him on the field, across the field, so he can chase that guy down. Really serious speed, Brandon. His brothers, which is crazy, he's the third fastest sibling in the Humphrey family right now because his older brothers, one of them went to Arizona, one of them signed with Oklahoma. They were 3-star and 2-star prospects. One of them just finished a graduate transfer year at Nevada recently. But all the guys in his family are fast, and those guys have clocked like low 4.3s in their career on the laser. So he's still got to drop his time a little bit, but his dad was one of the schoolboy legends as a Houston area running back. And the one thing, Brandon, is there's a connection through the family tree. The extended family also extends to Bobby Humphrey and Marlon Humphrey, the Pro Bowl cornerback right now for the Baltimore Ravens. The one thing when you flip on the film, you want to see a little bit more physicality out of Julian Humphrey, but we know Kirby Smart, we know Jamil Adai now. That thing will get figured out in Athens, or he won't find himself on the field early at Georgia if he's not willing to come up and punish the ball carrier when they run that stretch play or they run that play out wide. That's one of the things you get in him, and he's an active recruiter, Brandon. He doesn't have 1 million followers on social media like Evan Stewart does, but he's a guy that's active on TikTok. He chose Georgia, and it seems like Georgia has really got galvanized and picked up a lot of recruiting momentum from it, not just with guys like Shamar Stewart, but, you know, I guess you probably played the clip on your show. I don't know if the timelines allowed you to, but when it was time for him to make his decision, he motioned off away from the stage and the podium and pointed to out in the crowd, and they brought in another live bulldog ceremony, a live bulldog in his commitment ceremony. I think the first grand reveal where everybody knew that Julian Humphrey was coming was, I think it was his mother who looked off to the side and saw the bulldog coming and had the big all moment that, you know, it seems like a lot of ladies do when they see a cute dog or a cute puppy enter the scene. So that was memorable. Now's the chance for Julian Humphrey to make some money moves on the recruiting trail for Georgia before he winds up in Athens. And Brendan, I think it's kind of fortuitous, or just the way things go for Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs, that Julian Humphrey has been committed to Florida for some time and didn't have an All-American game destination, but all of a sudden he flips to Georgia or commits to Georgia after a brief decommitment of about 3 weeks, and all of a sudden he finds himself playing with a lot of other Bulldogs in the All-American Bowl out in Texas. Here's a cool little stat, Brandon. There's 21 current commitments right now on Georgia's recruiting class, and as it stands right now, 6 of them were at one point committed to another school. I think that number is going to go up, and that's just the way Georgia football recruits. It's amazing what happens when you prioritize that stuff.
All right, let's do this really quick because I've kept you long, and I know you got stuff to do. So let me just squeeze this in real quick before we see tonight on Peachtree TV. One of the guys that Humphreys also talked a lot about is the former Florida commit as well, the linebacker Shamar James. How realistic is Georgia's involvement with James right now, and is this another big name we're going to be talking a lot more about as you head towards the conclusion of this 2022 cycle?
Yeah, big name. I think he really grabbed my attention and grabbed my ear when he said he's really just now down to Florida and Alabama. He says he trusts Glenn Schumann for how he would develop him fully if that's where he wanted to go. I'd look for him to make at least 2 more visits before he makes a decision. He's still got an official visit in his back pocket to take to Georgia. maybe he's one of those late mid-December guys right before the early signing period. Also wouldn't be surprised to see him show up as an unofficial visitor on Saturday for Charleston Southern.
Interesting.
Shamar James, linebacker. He's got Jalen Walker. He's got the Jalen Walker recruiting right now. I think Jalen Walker is so amazing with his powers of persuasion. I think he could get the Florida administration to bring back Dan Mullen for another year if that's what he really wanted to set his mind to. That's how good he is at his job. And now Georgia has Jalen Walker also working the case for Shamar James as well. Be very interesting to watch that one.
That is incredible stuff. Jeff, thanks for all your updates. Very interesting nugget there at the end on James. We'll see you tonight, Peachtree TV. Top game in the state. Warner Robins going up to Cartersville. It doesn't get any better than that. Great atmosphere, two great teams. It's going to be a lot of fun. Also, some big names that are of interest of Georgia, obviously also continuing their run through the state playoffs there as well. So we'll cover all that for you tonight, Peachtree TV. Jeff, we'll see you there for that, and we'll look forward to talking to you here on the road, assisted by AAA again very soon on DawgNation Daily as well.
Hey, Brandon, give me one plug. This is the big tease, folks. I want you guys to check out DawgNation. In about an hour, everybody went crazy for what Kirby said behind closed doors in Jacksonville a few weeks ago. I've got another Kirby Smart story coming on the website in about an hour or so, where folks will go, yes, I know why these boys want to play so hard for that young man. It's involving a recruit and what happened in a moment of adversity. You guys are going to love to read about what Kirby told this young man on DawgNation.com.
Jeff, we'll check that out. Thanks so much for your time. I can't wait to read that story.
Thanks. Great weekend.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So terrific stuff there from Jeff Sintel. And, of course, we'll see him tonight, Peachtree TV. See all of you there as well. Obviously, Warner Robins and Vic Burley, one of the top names for the class of 2023, going on the road up to Cartersville. They're going to have, 6,000, 7,000 people, I think, in the stadium. This is what you want to see. Round 2 of the state playoffs. We're kind of down to that round of 16 here. And you got big games like this all across the state, none bigger than what we have for you tonight on TV. Can't wait to see you there for that. But we'll also keep our eyes on, Gunnar Stockton against Jeff Davis, good defensive team, trying to slow down the Georgia quarterback commit. Obviously, across the board there, we've seen, number one teams go down in a scenario like this before. We'll be watching that really closely as we head towards that quarterfinal round of 8 next weekend. So big high school football tonight. We'll broadcast our friends at Warner Robins taking on our friends at Cartersville, but we'll also follow the rest of the state action there as well. Let me also say this, we go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean, that this is a time to make a great announcement, and our friends from Royal Caribbean are going to be a big part of this. Now, let me just say this, that we had as a goal at the beginning of this year to make this the biggest year in the history of DawgNation for a lot of reasons, knowing that Georgia was probably in line for a special season, but also knowing that we come off of 2020 in which things were just kind of weird, right? We were not able to do some of the things that we had done a lot in the past, and so we wanted to do some of those here this year. But there was also, I think, a push to do things we'd never done before, to make it bigger and better than ever maybe even imaginable. And we really challenged ourselves around here with DawgNation to find a way to do that. Because one of the things that we've always believed here is that DawgNation's not supposed to be two-dimensional. It's not supposed to be something that you read on a screen. We want it to be something that you can interact with. Shows like this give you a chance to do that. Meet the people who are publishing the content. In my case, all I really do are shows, but to get a chance to feel like you know me there as well. We interact with comments. We have meet and greet opportunities. We try to be as accessible as we possibly can. I love seeing a lot of you on game days, whether it's Knoxville last week or in Athens tomorrow, wherever else. We just want to be three-dimensional. We want you to feel like you know us. We want to feel like we know you. We want to really kind of make DawgNation interactive that way. It also means pushing ourselves to do really fun things and to create opportunities for you to be a part of fun things with us. And so that's what we're going to do. Announcing this for 2022, a very special first-time event. We're going to do a DawgNation cruise with our friends from Royal Caribbean. This is going to be an incredible celebration of what's already been a great year for Georgia football, and we think is going to finish on an even better note than this. When it's all said and done, I know I'm going to need a vacation. I think many of you are going to probably feel like you need one there as well. So you can join us on the DawgNation team as we set sail coming up in April. It's the week of April 26th that we're going to be there and doing all of that. So that's going to be fun. You see the dates there on your screen, April 25th to the 29th. That's when it's all going to go down, and we're going to be sailing with our friends at Royal Caribbean on Independence of the Seas. What a beautiful ship this is. Unbelievably wonderful ship. And the ports of call, the itinerary is going to be great as well. Coco Cay. You've heard us talk about Perfect Day Coco Cay before. We're going to be at Perfect Day Coco Cay. All the things you've heard me saying before. You'll get a chance to experience that. Also spending a day there at Nassau as well. We'll have some special Dog Nation themed events. That's the week of the NFL draft. So we're going to have, I think, a draft party there on that Thursday night as a bunch of dogs get their name called potentially in the first round. We're going to celebrate that. I can't say this and commit to this as of yet. There could also be a special guest or two involved in all of this, but the most special guest of all is going to be you when you join us for the Dog Nation Cruise, April 25th and 29th. Tickets are going to go on sale for this on November 29th. So we're telling you about this now so you can get ready to make your plans. November 29th is when you can start booking this and being a part of the special Dog Nation Cruise with us. It's all done in partnership with our friends at Royal Caribbean, and also you've heard me talk about the Cruise and Vacation Authority before. That's David and Howard and the great work they're doing. Of course, they're UGA grads. They love UGA fans, and they've worked very, very hard to put all of this together so we can all go on a gigantic cruise together, Independence of the Seas, in April for a very special Dog Nation Cruise. So let me do this. Join us for the Dog Nation Cruise, of course, but let's go ahead and give some folks some information for the Cruise and Vacation Authority, because when it's time to book, this is how you're going to do it. It's tcava.com. That's the website, tcava.com, or 770-952-8300. That number, once again, 770-952-8300. November 29th is when it starts being able to be booked. So the Dog Nation Cruise, I'm going to be there. Jeff Sentell's going to be there. Mike Griffith's going to be there. The Dog Nation team coming together, maybe some special guests there as well. But we want you to be there too. It's going to happen November 29th. That's when the booking begins for a cruise setting sail in April. Can't wait for that. Dog Nation Cruise here as we turn the calendar to 2022. This is going to be incredible. So very quickly, let me kind of give you some content here as we're cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Told you before, handful of games I'm very much interested in as we roll through the weekend here. Talked about Ohio State, Michigan State off the top. Very similar point spread for Alabama hosting Arkansas on Saturday. There's an obvious comparison here for Georgia with Alabama in that when Georgia hosted Arkansas a few weeks ago, completely blasted them in its own stadium, 137-0, could have won 100-0 if it wanted to. I mean, Georgia just had that kind of day. For Alabama, they've had a hard time controlling games to that regard. Go back to the LSU game a couple of weeks ago. They were probably in their own stadium, lucky to even win that game. So does Alabama look like Alabama against Arkansas tomorrow? Late in the season with the SEC title game looming. By the way, Alabama's still playing for the right to even be in that game. Can Alabama look the part against Arkansas, much the way that Georgia did not too long ago? I think that's an interesting comparison. Connor Riley also brought up something last night on Cover 4 Live, which I think is also interesting too, that right now, technically speaking, Georgia only has one win against a team ranked in the College Football Playoff Top 25. That currently is Arkansas. Depending on how Arkansas plays on Saturday, it could be in line to move up in the rankings. Last week, Arkansas did. Or if Alabama completely blasts them, could be in line to not be knocked out of the playoff rankings. So pay attention to that. But there's also a chance. I mean, Arkansas's got 3 losses. They are ranked. Another team that Georgia's beaten with 3 losses is Clemson. Clemson's actually favored against Wake Forest on Saturday. You almost wonder, a Clemson win against Wake, just given the fact that Wake's a top 10 team, does that actually move Clemson back in the College Football Playoff Top 25? And maybe from a resume standpoint, Georgia could double its number of playoff Top 25 wins if Clemson re-enters. Ultimately, it's not really a ding against UGA. UGA's handled its business so effectively. But it's the kind of thing you will hear people bringing up. So we'll see how many playoff top 25 wins Georgia ultimately finishes with. Cincinnati gets a chance to play SMU. SMU, with apologies to Houston, is probably the best non-Cincinnati team in the American Athletic Conference. And I think you know the story for the Bearcats by now. They keep on keeping on. They remain undefeated, but they've also failed to cover in each of their last 4 games. So this is a team that's kind of looking to try to find some week-to-week play dominance to match the big marquee win they have at Notre Dame. And, boy, we'll just see if that happens against a pretty good SMU team. I'm of the belief that eventually they're going to be leapfrog by Michigan or Michigan State or whatever else. I don't believe that Cincinnati is going to be a playoff team. I think Cincinnati right now is giving the committee permission to exclude it based on the way that it's playing against conference foes, but maybe more impressive against an SMU team that could still finish 11-1. I think they still have a chance to finish. That could be a little bit of a signal that they want to be taken more seriously. The two games of SEC note for me as well. It's Florida going on the road to Missouri. They're about an 8.5-point favorite. Auburn going on the road to South Carolina. They're a little bit more than a touchdown favorite there. For these two teams, they're kind of reeling right now. Auburn without its quarterback, Bo Nix. Can they turn to TJ Finley? It's a battle of these first-year SEC coaches between Harsin and Beamer. I think that's a pretty fun game. And obviously, we know the situation for Florida. I don't know how they're favored by that much really against anybody right now on the road. Last road game for Florida was a disaster at South Carolina. Missouri's actually played a little better as of late, including beating those aforementioned Gamecocks last week. So we shall see about all of that. And I guess also pretty interesting here. Oregon on the road at Utah is kind of an interesting game in that Oregon's actually an underdog in Salt Lake. Rice-Eccles Stadium has historically been a pretty tough place to play. Utah obviously also ended Oregon's championship playoff hopes back in 2019. I think that Oregon's probably going to pass this test on Saturday, but I think it's also one of those things that if Oregon becomes the other playoff team here, and if they keep winning, they will be, that's the kind of game that Georgia, I would assume, is just salivating for the chance to play. One of the things you'll see, and maybe you haven't really watched Oregon much since the Ohio State game, but if you do tune in to watch it against Utah on Saturday, here's the thing you're going to see. This Oregon team's not very good offensively, at least when it comes to throwing the ball. Anthony Brown's quarterback, recent transfer into the program from Boston College, I think, if I'm remembering that from a couple of years ago. But either way, Oregon's not very good throwing the football. They're good defensively. Obviously, Kayvon Thibodeau is as good as it gets, but they're not a great offensive team, and in particular when it comes to throwing the football there as well. I mean, I think that Oregon would be as easy a playoff matchup as you could possibly have for Georgia. In fact, maybe even easier than Cincinnati would be. So watch Oregon on Saturday against Utah. That could be a little bit of an interesting preview of what might happen there for the postseason and all that. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. Also, a couple cool things to tell you about here before we say goodbye. Obviously, the world champion Atlanta Braves, they've got a big announcement here. 2022 tickets for all Braves games go on sale today at noon. I'm talking about big matchups next season. American League teams coming to town. Astros rematch. Obviously, the World Series. Red Sox, the Angels there as well. Get a chance to see Mike Trout and a very talented team. Shohei Ohtani, of course, when the Angels come to town. Also, all those great National League matchups that you've come to love and expect. Dodgers, Giants, and everything that goes along with that. Also, a really fun promotional calendar of special dates for a chance to get some of those cool collectibles. How about Glavine, Maddox, and Smoltz when it comes to the bobbleheads? Another Ronald Acuna Jr. offering a bat flip version from Acuna this year. A cool Ozzy Albies giveaway there as well. And more of that to come later on. But tickets for the 2022 season go on sale today. So obviously Braves.com/tickets for more on that. Braves.com/tickets there. Let me also give away a few golden shoes here for a moment. On Friday, we'd like to do a little bit of a golden shoes dump. We kind of collect some of these that have kind of matriculated through the week, so we'll give away a few of these here right now, including our first one here. How about a golden shoe winner going out to our buddy Russell Jafaris, who's worked as hard as anybody to keep the hashtag JD to NYC alive. Russell, we appreciate that. He also retweets Regina Roberts, who gives you the cool meme of Kirby's son holding up the sign with Jordan pointing. It says, "It's okay to vote for a defensive player for the Heisman when he's the most dominant player in college football." So thanks to Regina and Russell for keeping the Jordan Davis campaign going. Hashtag JD to NYC. We'll give a golden shoe out for that. Also, our buddy Donnie Penton, who kind of checks in with a very funny version of Dan Mullen. When someone mentions recruiting during the season, Mullen says, "We don't do that here." Obviously, having some fun there with that. Good stuff with Donnie Penton. Donnie will make you a golden shoe winner there as well. And then our last one, let me explain this here for a moment. Brian Kephart sends this to me. I love this like crazy because Brian, a longtime commenter of ours during YouTube, also K9 Blues, Enrique Murillo. These are like well-known, well-established veterans in our YouTube comment section. And I guess they got together in Knoxville last week to watch the Dogs, as they say, smother those Vols. I love the line here. They say mustard's the choice because they can't catch up. So that's really good for Brian Kephart. Glad to see him, K9 Blues, Enrique Murillo, folks from our YouTube comment section getting together to watch the game. And it's always great to see Dog fans having such a good time on all of that. By the way, speaking of having a good time, you can also have a good time yourself here this weekend with the Finnish Long Drink. And one of the cool things with the Finnish Long Drink is you've heard me talk about the different varieties. There's the traditional that comes in the blue can with the grapefruit flavor. There's the cranberry, which obviously speaks for itself, has the cranberry flavor. Long Drink Zero, Long Drink Strong. Well, you're maybe saying, which of those long drink varieties do I want to try? The good news is you no longer have to choose. They've got the 8-can variety pack available now, where you get 2 of each of the 4 varieties. This is a great way to experience the Finnish long drink for the first time. It came to the United States in the 1950s. Started in the 1950s in Finland. It's been in the United States for the last couple of years. Now it's available all across Georgia, wherever you are. So try yourself some Finnish long drink. You can check it out online, thelongdrink.com. There's a place to put in your zip code. And when you put in your zip code, you can just find wherever it is near you, and you can enjoy some today. As I said before, you can pick out that 8-can variety pack and try all 4 of the flavors. We've had so many folks tell us how much they love the Finnish long drink. We think you're going to love it too. So make sure you try that today. It's a great thing to take with you into the weekend. Always a lot of fun with our friends at the Finnish long drink. I know I've got some in my refrigerator right now. It's very, very popular around my household. It'll be popular there for you too. So good stuff with the Finnish long drink. Try some today. All right, so as we get ready to wrap up here, hope you're enjoying the start to your weekend. Thanks for making DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger on a Friday a part of that. We will see you in Athens tomorrow. Final Kroger kickoff from Athens tomorrow before the dog walk there at the Tate parking lot. We'll be looking forward to doing that with you. We'll be after the game for our final time this season, the UGA bookstore, and it's always cool when the calendar turns to November, folks there at the bookstore kind of get ready for that holiday type thing, and you see a lot of folks, they're not just shopping for themselves anymore when it comes to UGA apparel, but they are shopping for all the special family and friends they have that want some good-looking UGA gear, so a great chance to get that tomorrow at the UGA bookstore there as well. And I'll look forward to talking about the Dogs with you on our DawgNation postgame show from the UGA bookstore tomorrow after the game. That'll be a good time. How about those lousy, stinking Gators? How about a Gator Hater countdown? 344 days from now, going back to Jacksonville, get another win there. And as Kirby Smart reminds you, we're going to keep the intensity up.
You make them never want to play again. You just laugh and point to the scoreboard. Physically, I want to break them.
Good idea from Kirby Smart. We'll see you Monday, everybody. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews will show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can trust them to do that for all of you today. All right, we'll get a couple quick comments here. We got to be quick today, y'all. We cannot go real long because I got 8,000 things. So appreciate you being here. Good stuff. And I want you part of the DawgNation cruise. I hope you can make it. It's going to be a great time in April. Goes on sale here very soon. November 29th, I believe, is the on sale date for that. So really want you there for that DawgNation cruise. That's going to be so much fun. So much fun. Leaving on Monday, April 25th, coming back on April 29th. It's just going to be a great time. A great time, and I can't wait for all of that. All right, so quick comments. We'll bounce through the section here for a moment. Facebook, YouTube, and DawgNation.com, and we'll roll out of here after that here on a Friday. Bill Sanders, that's not nice, but that's funny, but it's not nice. Philip Jordan Well having a good time here. Barry Watkins says Arkansas needs to worry. Bama needs to worry about Arkansas and Auburn before it worries about Georgia. That's pretty funny. Let's see what else. Randy Hall says, when are we going to be back at Marlowe's again? We're going to be there in December, Thursday, December the 2nd, for a big event there at Marlowe's. We've been talking about this a little bit, but we're going to be there. Big event coming up on Thursday, December 2nd. We got so much going on. We got the Marlowe's event. We got the big tailgate coming up. Chase for the championship tailgate, the day of the SEC championship game. Thinking ahead to the cruise coming up in April. So we got a lot going on. Kevin Cook says, who's going on the cruise? I'll be there. I'll be there with bells on. Travis McCullough says, are you going to do the DawgNation Daily from the cruise ship in April? Yeah, I think that's the plan. What we probably, just to be completely honest, since we're going to be in the Caribbean. We probably won't do it live. We'll probably record it. So it's, streaming from the middle of the Caribbean is not the easiest thing to do. So we'll probably pre-record it and then post it each and every day at the normal time. But that's kind of the plan there on that. Steve Highland says, from NorCal to the SEC Championship game, here I come. Steve, can't wait to see you there in Atlanta for that. That's great. Daniel Aldrich predicts that Arkansas is going to give Alabama all at once and then some. That'd be very interesting if that's the case. That'd be very interesting for sure. Randy Hall also reminds us that Dwan Mathis, I guess, is reported to be leaving Temple. I don't think he's officially in the transfer portal, but I believe that's what the reports are that he's going to do. So I hate that he didn't find a home there, but I hope he finds one here at some point in time. Randy also looking forward, he says, to watching Buford going on another state championship run. Yeah, I mean, you could be setting up for a pretty interesting matchup there in 6A with Buford for sure. With Lee County looming, that's a good team. That could be a fun matchup. J. Bob on the subject of Florida waving big bucks at Dan Lanning. I guess that could be interesting. Let's see what else is going on here. YouTube side of things here for a moment. Wade Wolford looking ahead to next year a little bit for Georgia. There's some interesting stuff coming down the pike on that. Justin Farmer on the subject of Stetson Bennett leading Georgia to a national championship. Yeah, listen, I think he's given Georgia a pretty good, a really good chance here for sure. Frank Patterson asked about the port that we're leaving out of. We're actually going to sail out of Port Canaveral. So we're going to so that's a very easy port to get to. Easy drive, at least from where I am here in the Atlanta area. Easy drive to Port Canaveral. We're going to sail out of Port Canaveral on Independence of the Seas. Perfect Day, Coco Cay, Nassau. It's going to be incredible. Incredible. Thomas T-Bone says, number one in the nation not being televised doesn't sound right. What do you think? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I know that's kind of frustrating for some people. I think there are probably more streaming games coming in the future, so ultimately that might not quite mean what it once did. But I get what you're saying on that. I do. B. Red says, how many years was Saban a head coach before winning anything? So obviously he'd been at Michigan State before coming to LSU. His first national championship at LSU came in 2003. First SEC title came in 2001. Obviously he didn't really win much of note at Michigan State before getting there. And was a head coach at, was it Toledo before going to Michigan State? It was one of those MAC schools. I believe it was Toledo. So, yeah, I mean, he had a good number of years, like a lot of these coaches did, of working his way up before ultimately getting that first big win. We've seen Kirby Smart traveling a little bit different path in that he became a head coach at a big job as a rookie head coach and has really enjoyed pretty good success right away. Paul Moon excited about Brock Vandegrift, and maybe we'll get a chance to see Vandegrift on Saturday. I would certainly like that. Tristan West says Cartersville Warner Robins should be a good one. Warner by at least 10 points. I mean, listen, when we saw Warner Robins against Lee County earlier this year, I thought that Warner Robins was maybe just a tick below Collins Hill as the best team we put on TV this year. They're in a little bit different spot now. I had a terrific running back who sustained a season-ending injury, and they've had to kind of regroup a little bit there because of Malcolm Brown's injury. But that's still a really, really good football team. And, I mean, that's a tough test for anybody. I'm not going to make a pick in the game. I'm going to be like the ESPN guys. I'm not going to make a pick in a game that I'm calling. But I do think that you may be underselling Cartersville here just a little bit. It's a little bit different kind of Cartersville team than maybe we've seen in the past. They've also got a really good running back. But I think the game tonight has a really good chance of being a very, very good one. But ultimately, probably only Collins Hill really what rivals Warner Robins as far as what we've been able to put on TV here to this season. Cliff Payne wondering about injured players coming back. I mean, I guess there's a chance that Dominic Blaylock plays. Seems like he was pretty close to playing last week against Tennessee. Did travel, did put a uniform on. Beyond that, I don't quite know. But some of the guys you're concerned about being injured, Nolan and Devontae White, guys like that, it seems like they're going to be fine, regardless of how much they play tomorrow. All right, last run through the comment section, y'all. We got to go. Barry Watkins has got some interesting feelings here. Randy Hall says Collins Hill played well without Travis Hunter. Yeah, that's what's amazing is we saw Collins Hill with Hunter against Rome. I mean, Travis Hunter's as good as I've seen in high school. I mean, he's just really good. But when we saw Collins Hill again a few weeks ago against Mill Creek, that was like a 1 versus 2 in 7A. Collins Hill, even without Travis Hunter, was still just as explosive offensively as they had been. Horn, the quarterback going to Missouri, is really good. And, Collins Hill just got some weapons. Collins Hill is also better defensively than I think folks gave him credit for sure. Matt Rukavine asked a good question. He says, do Golden Shoe candidates have to be submitted via Twitter? They don't have to be, but I'm not very good at checking my Facebook. The only time I'm ever on Facebook is when I do this show. So, I have a Facebook account, but I don't really use it. And I don't really know why. I'm not against it. I just don't. Honestly, I'm just always chasing my kids around, I guess. That's probably what it ultimately comes down to, is I'm just always doing something like that. So if you send it via Facebook, I probably won't see it. Some people do send, like our buddy Forestry Dog, for instance, sends things via the comment section of DawgNation.com, and I'll typically see that when we post the podcast each and every day. So if you don't do Twitter, but you want me to see it, put it in the comment section when we post the show at DawgNation.com, and I'll generally see it there. In 2022, I'm going to try to get a little bit better about using Facebook, because I know some of you, try to interact on Facebook, and it's not that I'm against that. I'd love to do that. It's just not a daily habit that I have that I'd like to try to get into there a little bit. Keith Fold says that Miriam was the first to do hashtag JD to NYC. Is that right? I thought I was the first one that did that. But obviously we love the great Miriam. So maybe great minds think alike on that. Rick Wallace says you can sign up for a free trial, then cancel tomorrow. So here's what's important: the ESPN, SEC Network Plus, I think is if you've got cable, you've got access to the game tomorrow. This is not the subscription thing that UFC comes on. Connor's going to have a story about this at DawgNation.com, but this is not like a pay-per-view game. Now, if you've got paid TV service satellite, cable, something like that, if you've got that, then you've got access to the game tomorrow. You just have to go through this to get it. It's the same thing as if you watch Georgia baseball games or if you watch gymnastics or something like that, that it's just it's the digital version of the SEC network. Like, for instance, I'm not going to give a free plug to my TV provider because they certainly don't pay for my they're charging me full freight for what I'm watching. But on my service, I can actually find the digital broadcast on my regular TV. You can actually search that, and you can watch all of that. So, I mean, I can watch Georgia baseball games. I can watch all the SEC baseball games all right there. It's not, my provider actually makes that pretty easy. Some of them don't function quite as effectively, but you don't have to. This is not pay-per-view. I know there's an ESPN pay-per-view streaming thing where UFC and stuff like that air some of the boxing stuff, but that's not what this is. Connor's going to have a story about this. You can read more about that. But if you subscribe to a TV provider, then you get this game to go along with that. Bill Kelly says, I have no idea what my password is. Yeah, I mean, I certainly get all that kind of stuff. I certainly get all that kind of stuff. All right. We're getting ready to go here. Good stuff. Thanks for being here. Y'all check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online, ajc.com. Obviously a debacle last night at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And you want the aftermath of this, you can get it. And this Falcons organization, man, you talk about getting it wrong in every direction. A couple of years ago, Matt Ryan was still playing effectively, and yet instead of going all in to take advantage of what were going to be obviously going to be his final years with Julio Jones, Atlanta pretended they were going to get this massive draft haul and add a bunch of players who were going to, fill in other spots, as opposed to knowing they had a tiny thread of an opportunity with a couple of aging veterans, and to maximize that chance, Atlanta chose not to do that. They chose to build for the future. And that was the dumbest thing ever because that was squandered. Then in last year's draft, knowing that Ryan's effectiveness was essentially over, Julio Jones was gone, you get a chance to draft Justin Fields, you take a tight end, they need everything. This organization is just completely broken. they are as irrelevant on the Atlanta and Georgia sports scene as anyone could possibly be. And frankly, they better be thankful that they're not getting as much negative attention as they possibly could be getting with the first-year regime here. It's just an absolute mess. But you can get an update on what happened last night against the Patriots. You had 3 Falcons quarterbacks intercepted in the same quarter. Y'all, that's not easy to do. That's a very hard thing to do, but it happened last night. So the aftermath of all of that, you can check that out. Also, a good column from Steve Hummer on that topic. And on a more serious note, obviously folks are following the trial down in South Georgia related to the horrible shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, and the AJC podcast Breakdown, which has done great work for a long time. They're actually following this really closely. I was talking to people the other day about the work they're doing to follow this trial. This is one of those serious things that around here we try to have fun and keep it lighthearted, but it's important to know the serious things that are happening in our state. This is an example of that. You can even say nationally, a story like this hasn't gotten enough coverage, but that's what local media is really for. In this case, in kind of a unique way with the Breakdown podcast, following this all very closely. So you can check that out as well, ajc.com, to find out more information on that. So I would encourage you to do that. I also want to say thank you for being here for DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger today, for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down, our buddy Dari Payro with us for Go With The Flow later on this afternoon, but always making sure we have a chance to interact and have these comments together each and every day after our show is done. Really appreciate that. For those that I'll get a chance to see tomorrow, I'll look forward to doing that. For those of you who've been with us all season long for a season's worth of home games, thanks for your support of DawgNation there as well. You'll have a great day. We will see you Monday. DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, the R.S. Andrews Cool Down after that. Enjoy the game, everybody.